Hello everyone, it's Wednesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. North Korea announced that it successfully carried out ground tests of solid fuel engines to power new intermediate-range ballistic missiles. These tests coincided with a week that's packed with major defense-related events, as a trilateral meeting between defense chiefs of Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo took place on Sunday, followed by the Security Consultative Meeting and the inaugural defense ministerial meeting of UN Command member states. The most noteworthy is the 55th edition of SCM, where South Korean and U.S. defense chiefs updated their tailored deterrence strategy and announced a new defense vision, upgraded for the first time in 4 years. What are the details and how did the experts see such a series of events? For this, we have invited Doctor Go Myong-hyun, a senior fellow from the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Go, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being with us. And we also have Professor Brian Myers from Dongmusa University. Good to have you with us, Professor Myers.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. Now, first question to our Dr. Go. So, North Korea conducted ground tests of solid fuel engines to power a new IRBM. The first stage engine test was on Saturday and the second was on Tuesday. Could you tell us details on this?
So the recent test is actually quite significant on two levels. First is the timing. North Korea is trying to send a message, as always, to Seoul and Washington that it's, despite whatever Seoul and Washington agree on, or especially the message of strengthening deterrence against North Korea soldiers on, further developing its missile capability by this time around showing that he has a new type of rocket engine, which is pretty impressive, given that North Korea has already developed dozens of different types of missiles, ranging from short range, medium range, intermediate range, and the intercontinental range missiles. And the technical significance, which is the second part of this recent test, is that North Korea has achieved a higher level of engine technology, which is solid fuel engine technology, but they have deployed this engine technology to a limited number of missile models. And then before, North Korea only had short-range ballistic missiles with KN-23 and 24 with a solid fuel rocket engine, and then had one type of a medium-range ballistic missile with the same engine technology. And finally, among the three different types of ICBM North Korea possesses, only one model, Hwasong-18, had a solid fuel engine, a solid fuel rocket engine. So this time, North Korea essentially has added another segment, the intermediate range, and then this model now carries a solid fuel rocket engine. So in that sense, I think North Korea can demonstrate that it has deployed, or at least in the process of deploying, the more cutting-edge rocket engine technology that has a capability to shorten the preparation time for launch, which compounds the difficulties that the alliance faces in targeting and tracking North Korean missiles. So in that sense, I think this represents a heightened level of threat, and at the same time, a signal to Seoul and Washington that North Korea is not scared by the recent statement that was issued jointly between the Defense Minister of South Korea and the Defense Minister of the United States.
Right, I see. So it was basically trying to send a message, and we could see technical advances regarding rocket engine technology. I see, Dr. Go. Well, Professor Myers, like I said before, the timing coincided with the annual security talks between Defense Minister Shin Won-sik and his U.S. counterpart at the 55th Security Consultative Meeting. Let's tap into the specifics of the joint statement. The two countries agreed to expand cooperation through a shared early warning system. What is this, and how would this help to deal with North Korea's threats?
Well, not to get too technical, it's a global missile defense system which uses all kinds of different sensors and satellites, radar sensors, infrared, optical, and so on, to detect when a missile is being launched and to figure out where it's going, what the probable trajectory is. And the idea is that by sharing this information with its allies, the U.S. can give them time to prepare for a potential attack. And that in turn is supposed to discourage adversarial states like North Korea from launching attacks, because it raises the likelihood of a punitive counterstrike. But the big question really is how effective such a system would be in protecting South Korea, and especially the main metropolis of Seoul, which is virtually on the border with North Korea. Dr. Go was just talking about the solid fuel engine technology, which would make it harder to get advance notice of a strike in time. And a missile launched directly at Seoul would hit home in a matter of minutes. So while this early warning system is certainly better than nothing, the benefits of it shouldn't be overstated either.
Right, I see. So we'd have to think about its effectiveness, I guess. Well, Dr. Go, one more notable thing was that the two defense leaders signed the revised document of the Tailored Deterrence Strategy, or so-called TDS, marking the first update since it was adopted in 2013. What was this document about, and why did it need an update?
So this is essentially a reaffirmation of the U.S. commitment to defend South Korea with the full range of its military capabilities, ranging from nuclear to conventional, and including the missile defense system. So the reason why it's called tailored deterrence strategy is because it's showing that the United States is taking into consideration the advancements in North Korea's nuclear capability in this case, that the United States essentially has an adaptable deterrence strategy. So the core of this element is really detailing or outlining what the United States is going to put on the table to defend South Korea. So, but then at the same time, there's enough ambiguity, and the ambiguity in this case is intended on the part of the United States not to scare off North Korea too much. After all, the United States has absolute military advantage over North Korea, despite the seriousness of North Korea's threat. So if you compare the Tailored Deterrence Strategy document of 2013, that was first signed, as you mentioned, 10 years ago, and today's, so there isn't much of a difference, given that this document is really about commitment rather than detailing too specifically what the United States is going to do. But then there's one interesting change, which is whereas in 10 years ago, United States used the term nuclear umbrella to denote United States nuclear capability to deter North Korea. Nuclear umbrella has more of a defensive meaning than offensive. This time around, the United States has used the term nuclear capability, which includes both defensive and offensive capabilities. So in that sense, I think it represents a more of a proactive or active stance against North Korea's nuclear threat. So this is fits the assurance part of deterrence, assurance part of a U.S. defense commitment. So in that sense, this reflects the recent changes that has taken place this year, especially not recent, but this year between United States and South Korea, in which the United States raised the level of assurance and deterrence, both assurance and deterrence, on North Korea's nuclear threat. So, the assurance component is clearly United States being more proactive and specific about using its nuclear capability to defend South Korea. So I think this is reflected now in 2023's version of the Tailored Deterrence Strategy document.
All right, I see. Well, I'd like to ask our Professor Meyer's opinion as well on this revised document. Though the details are unknown because of its confidentiality, what do you expect the revision might have been, in your opinion?
Well, I think, most of the answer to that question has already been given by Dr. Go. The revisions are likely to bolster South Korea's sense of being a more equal partner, so there'll be more emphasis on South Korea's military capabilities, and there'll be, as Dr. Go said, some expression of America's readiness to bring all possible assets to bear, conventional and nuclear, when defending South Korea. But I think we should also keep in mind what this revision is not going to entail, namely the nuclear sharing with the United States that the Yoon administration made a somewhat vague claim to having achieved earlier this year. The Americans have made very clear that nuclear sharing is just not going to happen. So the Yoon administration and ruling party are, of course, emphasizing the equality reflected in all this joint rhetoric between the two defense ministers, while the opposition party and the opposition media are in effect telling voters that South Korea has become perhaps less sovereign, more subservient to the United States since President Yoon took over. As you say, the details of the revision are not going to be made public, but I guess the truth is somewhere between those accounts.
All right, I see. It's quite interesting to hear that it is quite notable to see the nuclear sharing part would not have been included. Well, Dr. Go, apart from the joint statement, a separate document, the defense vision of the ROK-US alliance, was issued as well. What did this document include?
So this document is not really a separate document from other documents reaffirming U.S. commitment to defend South Korea. So we have to understand this is more about celebrating the 70 years of the alliance between the two countries. So, but this document is clearly more specifically focused on the defense part of the alliance or military part. So in that sense, it's about recapping the history of the U.S. defense commitment to defend South Korea, which underlies the alliance itself, and then also outlining the vision for the defense cooperation between the two countries. So it's broadly similar to the joint statements that the United States and South Korea issued throughout this year, the summit, as well as other communiques. Having said that, though, I think fundamentally the message here is one of continuity. I think the United States wants to emphasize this part, especially, even though it sounds boring, it's all repetitive even. Continuity is very important right now because one elephant in the room, I would say, is the political changes that could take place either both in Seoul and Washington next year. There are major elections taking place. In case of South Korea, it's general elections that elects the members to the National Assembly, and there's a presidential election in the United States. And each one of these events could represent a break in the policy coordination between Seoul and Washington. So I think this document has its significance in the sense that it highlights the continuity and also outlines the vision of what alliance can be in the future. It's essentially about the alliance being more global, more comprehensive. And in that sense, it's not really new, but at the same time, it's really heartening to see this, to see the evolution of the military cooperation, defense cooperation between Seoul and Washington.
All right, I see. So it was more about celebrating 17th anniversary of bilateral alliance. But Professor Myers, as far as I know, this is the first time a defense vision has been issued since the 2010 Lee Myung-bak administration and again in November 2019 during the Moon Jae-in administration. How is the current document different from previous ones, and how did you see the significance of it?
Well, of course, it's different in tone from the Moon administration's version in 2019 in that it places more emphasis on strengthening deterrence of potential North Korean aggression and on cooperating militarily with like-minded countries. Other aspects, I think, like the need to modernize the military are more in the tradition of what the Moon administration had called for as well. As Dr. Go says, there's a good deal of continuity here. Generally speaking, I think this version has a more hardline or security conscious ring to it, especially when compared to the 2019 version, which had more talk of peace and prosperity on the peninsula. And I think a similar change can be seen in the rhetoric that the two defense ministers engaged in. Defense Minister Shin, in particular, said that if North Korea provokes a war, that will be the end of North Korea. This is the sort of hardline rhetoric that the Moon administration was very careful to avoid for 5 years. But on the other hand, the defense vision statement is pretty short on concrete specifics. Dr. Go just mentioned the election next year. And here the parliamentary elections. And one of the reasons why President Yoon's approval ratings have been stagnating is because conservatives here really question the rhetoric of some of his security talk. They question the sincerity of it. And his party now seems to be moving slightly to the left in advance of parliamentary elections. So I wouldn't overestimate the differences between this defense vision and the one that was put out in 2019.
Right, I see your point. Well, Dr. Go, one more thing that was discussed during SCM, the possible suspension of the September 19th Inter-Korean Military Agreement signed in 2018 under the previous Moon Jae-in administration was also discussed. And Defense Minister Shin Won-sik had been keep pushing to suspend this agreement, and they decided to continue this talk. What is Washington's position on this, and do you believe this is going to be eventually suspended?
So clearly, the problem with the September 19th military agreement is the fact that it reflects many of the demands posed by North Korea to South Korea for many decades. North Korea has had accused historically of South Korea of fomenting tension along the DMZ, the demilitarized zone that separates the two Koreas, and then characterize South Korea's defense measures such as establishing no-fly zones and setting up guard towers along the DMZ as hostile actions against the North, which is a mischaracterization. But then the Moon Jae-in administration that had signed this agreement with the North essentially reflected the North Koreans' perspective on this issue rather than South Korea's own militarist perspective. And in fact, when this agreement was signed in fact, Washington was pretty upset about it because much of the agreement was actually carried out without prior consultation with the United States. So in that sense, the baseline position of the United States regarding this agreement is one of, I would say, negativity. I would say disagrees with much of the elements of it. But at the same time, though, I think the United States government is concerned about the timing of cancellation of this agreement when things are relatively stable in the Korean Peninsula compared to elsewhere in the world. I think United States is, there's a trend on the part of the United States government when it comes to approaching South Korean security situation, which is putting the priority on stability rather than rectifying adverse security situations such as this agreement. And this means that I think the U.S. government is at the baseline level, even though it disagrees with the content of the agreement, at the same time doesn't want to rock the boat at this juncture when the U.S. government is as full plate regarding other issues and tensions in the Middle East, obviously the war in Ukraine and then tensions in China. These are all elements that are distracting the United States away from the Korean Peninsula. So in that sense, I think the U.S. government would like to see closer, I would say, discussion and with the South Korean government before the South Korean government proceeds with modifying, even outright canceling this agreement.
All right, more discussion to follow. Well, Professor Myers, meanwhile, just a day before the SCM, defense chiefs of Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo had a meeting, and there they agreed to launch a real-time missile warning data sharing system next month. And they also are expected to expand the joint training into a wide variety of other areas as well. How did you see such measures, and in what ways do you believe such measures would be able to boost the trilateral cooperation?
Well, I think the main aspect to emphasize is the trilateral nature of what they're planning. So to take the data sharing system, instead of South Korean data having to go through the US to Japan or Japanese data having to go through the US to South Korea, all relevant data would be shared in real time between the three partners, the three security partners. And this would have obvious benefits for all three, each of which is in a position to learn things that the other two might not be aware of. But I think the symbolic significance is at least as important as the substance, because this kind of activity is going to get the South Korean public used to working with Japan on the security front. And at least that's what Washington hopes will be the effect. I think there's a strong likelihood that trilateral cooperation will end almost as soon as the nationalist left returns to power here, if it does return to power. Many South Koreans, as you know, are deeply uneasy about cooperating militarily with Japan in a united front against North Korea. So it remains to be seen whether this data sharing system has the sort of staying power that the Americans want it to have.
All right, I see. Well, Professor Myers, I'd like to ask you one more question. I'd like to also talk about the meeting between defense chiefs of South Korea and 17 member states of the United Nations Command. What significance does this meeting have, and what was mainly discussed?
Well, let's remember that the previous South Korean administration, the Moon Jae-in government, was very keen on signing an end-of-war agreement or even a peace treaty with North Korea, which would naturally have led to the dissolution of the UN command. So during Moon Jae-in's term, many people here in South Korea and overseas, in the United States especially, worried that the mutual commitment of the UN command and South Korea to each other was under threat, was wavering in some way. So as I see it, the meeting on Tuesday was aimed in large part at reassuring both the world community and the domestic public here that the UN command will continue safeguarding South Korea's security. Of course, the UN cemetery for the soldiers killed in the Korean War is located here in Busan, where I am now. And there have been a few events here this week emphasizing the UN command's importance to South Korea. So this is an issue that conservatives here in particular really care a lot about.
All right, I see. So it was to reassure people that UN command is going to be there. Well, Dr. Go, South Korea is reportedly in talks with the UN command for its military to take more responsibility for the unit's staff. How is this discussion developing right now, and why are they trying to bolster the multinational command's presence?
I think it's all part of the revitalization of the United Nations Command. United Nations Command is kind of plays a second fiddle to the combined forces command between the South Korean military and the United States forces in Korea. But then, even though the commander of the United Nations Command is the same as the commander of the Combined Forces Command, which is the commander of the United States forces in Korea. So the reason why there are these dual hats commandancy for the commander of the U.S. forces in South Korea is because of the United Nations' very first mandate to send troops to defend South Korea against North Korean aggression back in 1950. So that's the reason why many have claim that, especially North Korea, and then those people who side with the North Korean argument, that the United Nations Command is an artifact of the past or like a remnant of the Cold War. Despite its history, United Nations Command serves a very important function of coordinating intervention and cooperation of the 17 original United Nations member states that sent troops to defend South Korea back in 1950. So, and then given that the tension with North Korea remains in place despite the 70 years of history, it means that in case of a contingency in the Korean Peninsula, United Nations Command, just as the Combined Forces Command, will have a very important role in defending South Korea against North Korean aggression. So in that sense, I think the South Korean government is aware of the necessity to revitalize the United Nations Command, because this is really a part of the comprehensiveness and the global nature of the alliance that both Seoul and Washington want the alliance to be. And that means more cooperation with the like-minded states around the world. So, and then one mechanism to this is clearly the UNC, the United Nations Command, and therein lies the motivation behind the South Korean government to revitalize it.
All right, I see. Well, thank you, Dr. Go, for explaining for us why South Korean government is trying to, like you said, revitalize the multinational command's presence in South Korea. All right, well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Dr. Go and Professor Myers, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
Always my pleasure.
Thank you. That's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.